Here today flying solo again, and wanted to welcome you to week 11 or episode 11. Today we're dealing with humanity's rebellion. We're going to be talking about the Tower of Babel. And this is actually something that we talk about quite a bit on the podcast, not necessarily out of this particular text or numbers of text, where we in Genesis and things. But it's something that we do talk about quite a bit. And that's this idea that God has a plan, God has a path that he wants us to go, that he wants his kingdom to be built in. And we just have this propensity to build our own way, to do our own thing for our own purposes. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back to share a little bit more about that today. All right, welcome back. Before we jump into the topic today, talking about the Tower of Babel and the humanity's rebellion, I want to talk about just a couple of things right off the top. Number one, this is the month of March, which is our March Madness Bible giveaway month. Every year in the month of March, everything that we kind of take in that's above and beyond our basic requirements and bills and everything like that we have to pay every month, we put that into a Bible giveaway. We've partnered with several different ministries this year. We've given some already to Men Unleashed out in Waxahachie. We've given some to Hunger for Love, which works with the Church Under the Bridge. We've got several more kind of in line. We gave some out to already to the Cross Brand Cowboy Church for their homeless ministry, their little blessing bags that they give. We've raised about $1,100 so far in special gifts that people have sent for this purpose. And so I'd ask you to pray about that. And if the Lord would lead you to give into the March Madness Bible giveaway, literally 100% of what we get over and above our expenses goes into that Bible giveaway. I think last year we were able to give away around 1,500 Bibles, which has been pretty much the norm for the last several years. So invite you into that. Also, as far as the ministry goes, if you would maybe prayerfully consider supporting the ministry. It is a listener, a viewer supported ministry. And primarily most of that's done by some of us in-house. But we don't take salaries or anything like that. 100% of any donation you might give will go directly into the ministry and into providing content, online courses, the app, materials, conferences, all of those things. It will help us do that. On that note, we're just about to finish and launch another course. Several years ago, actually talking with some family members of mine who are caring for older adults in the context of being a parent of someone who cares for a child that's disabled constantly. We're about to launch a course. I'm not sure what it's going to be called yet. Right now it's called Assistance in Trials. But it's going to talk about what it looks like and what it means to just to walk in and be faithful in a long-term caring situation where you're the caregiver, or in generally just when life is a constant pressure, it's not getting better. There's just situations in your life that are the way they are. They're hard and they're difficult. But we take a look at a biblical response of how to keep your faith sharp in trials and affliction. So you're going to want to check that out. It should be out by the end of the month, and so keep that on your radar. This week we've been talking in week 11 about the Tower of Babel, about man's rebellion. We talked last week, or we have talked in the past about the spiritual rebellion that brought us the violence and the chaos and the things before the flood through these spiritual beings taking of themselves wives of human beings. And this week we deal with man's rebellion, and God gave Noah, as he gave Adam and Eve, the mandate to go out, to go throughout the earth and subdue it, to be fruitful and multiply, scatter, fill the earth. But in human fashion, we thought a better way, instead of going out and taking his name and making great of his name in the world, we thought it would be a great idea to stay together and build ourselves our name. by building this tower. And so we see that in this text where we just are doing the opposite of what God's called us to do. And one of the things I wanted to talk about with my partners today that couldn't be here was where we see this now. And one of the things that you've seen in the devotions this week is, especially in the Western American church. And when I say the Western church, that includes, Europe and first world type countries, but a lot of times specifically, I want to refer to the American church and our mega church model. We kind of have this idea that bigger is always better, and not that bigger is wrong. I mean, we attend a very large church, and that's not it. That's not the issue. The issue is when that becomes your identity, and you lose sight of the kingdom, and you lose sight of missions, and you lose sight of going out into the world and just building up our own structure that's counter to what God would have us do. And we kind of think that once we get to this place of being either big or maybe just influential, that now we've gotten to some place where we can do real ministry. We can really make an impact. And we talked this week about how what that really does is it betrays a gap in our thinking about the actual sovereignty and greatness and power of God, and turns it back in on ourselves, where we start thinking of ourselves as we're the bee's knees. We're the ones that can do all the things. And we spend a lot of time trying to build this stability around ourselves. There's some weird, I say they're weird, they're just staggering statistics right now. And you can go look these up, chat GPT them or whatever, about the average amount of money a church spends on staff and buildings versus missions and outreach. It's actually staggering. It really is. There have been reports that I've read in the past where some 80 to 90% of a lot of churches' budgets are internal for buildings, upkeep, staff, and not so much outreach or even, support of ministries in the church, so much as they are the actual structure and infrastructure of the church. And so what does that have to do with the Tower of Babel? Well, it goes along with this teaching that we do a lot about, Bethel and Peniel, the house of God versus the face of God. It's our bend, it seems, as human beings to build our own way of doing things, to use the latest marketing research, or to figure out how to do stuff that we think will be successful in our demographic or our area of the country, or fill in the blank, our denomination, instead of just focusing and spending our resources and our energy on what God would have us do and how he has said that we should build things. And, we talked this week in Psalm 67 about part of that approach is when God blesses us, the point of him blessing us. And in the story this week about Babel, he blessed us with autonomy, with freedom, with a do-over. And the whole point of that do-over, that blessing and that autonomy, was to then take his name out into the world. And we just decided, we don't want to do that. We kind of want to just do our own thing. And so many times when we get blessing as a church, as a person, as a family, we start looking for ways to consume that blessing on ourselves. Hey, I got a raise at work this year, instead of how can I continue to help others, or maybe help with a ministry. It's, do we need a better car, a bigger boat, a bigger house? We're not all that. I mean, it's not always that overt or that ostentatious either. But I have to stop and wonder how many times we are actually thinking through the process of, okay, God's given me a blessing, either financial or with time or with an ability. Are we focusing those things on the gospel and on the kingdom, or just on self-consumption? Because that was not what he intended. Even in this story, he intended his blessing and his mercy to be taken out. And you even talked, I believe it was yesterday on Thursday, we had a devotion about the great reversal. God had said, and that's how he did it. He reversed our rebellion. He had said, go and do, and we decided we would stay and build. And so he was like, you know what? You're not going to do that. He confused our languages and we scattered. Now, next week in week 12, excuse me, a little yawn coming on. Next week in week 12, we're going to talk about what happens after a period of time when he dispersed us into the nations, And we're going to see how he ruled those nations and how he set them up, and then what went wrong in that even as well. And even fast forwarding, and we're going to get a little glimpse of where in Babel, God saw our rebellion. Instead of going and fulfilling the mandate, we stayed and built something of ourselves, made a name for ourselves. So he scattered our languages. But we can fast forward over to Acts 2 and see where God begins to actually reverse this judgment that he put on us at Babel with our languages. And that's where we see when the Spirit came, these languages, these tongues of fire, as they would be called, where people were speaking and hearing in languages that they had not previously known. So at Babel, we've got this confusion of language that forced us into obedience. And then at Pentecost, we have this unity of language that equips us to obey. And so you see these two stories kind of tie in together. And the whole purpose of this week was to, again, just put another piece in the puzzle, this overstretching arc of what God started with, how we rebelled and broke it, and how he's continuing to redeem it. And it's easy to look at the confusion of the languages as just God's judgment. And it was that. But just like with the flood, which was also God's judgment, there's also an element of mercy protecting us from ourselves. In one of the writings this week, I said that God saw that there was nothing that we could accomplish. Well, there's two sides to that coin. Yes, we could have accomplished great things together, but we could have also, as we have shown a pattern of doing, brought any number of elements of destruction and wickedness upon ourselves if we were left unchecked. And so he just stopped it. And he says, no, I want you to go out. So I'm going to force you to go out. We even see a hint of this in Jerusalem, that first century church, where he said, you're supposed to be going out, and they didn't. So he allowed persecution to come in Jerusalem and sent that Jerusalem church out, which is when the Gentile church really began to take off. Again, it's a New Testament mirror of the original mandate of Eden. And so we wanted to just paint this picture that this is not just an isolated story. This is human rebellion saying, I know what you said you want us to do, God, but I think I'm going to do it my own way. And then we do it, and it's disastrous, and it's potentially harmful to the world, and it's not fulfilling the kingdom purpose. And thankfully, God's got enough grace and God has enough wisdom to step in and to keep us from ourselves. So the questions we kind of wrapped up with this week for you and I to answer is, where in our own lives are we building our own towers of Babel? What do you mean building our own towers of Babel? I mean, in what ways are you building? In what ways am I building things that make names for ourselves? Maybe it's in our church, or our ministry, our personal lives. Where is it that we're more concerned about our name than we are about God's name? I'll be frank and honest with you. I see this a lot in different churches. Our ministry's been involved in churches before where we wanted to make ourselves available for service, and or to come in and do a training, and the leadership loved the idea, loved the ministry, thought it was really great, but we're so super hesitant to let us help or to ask us to help because they were afraid that their name wasn't on it. To the point of we've made material specifically for the same material, but for this church with their cover on it because they were concerned about their name, their marketing. That's the sin of Babel. That's the thinking pattern and the logic of Babel that went wrong. I am very appreciative of Mike here at Crossbrand because he is such a kingdom thinker. If he's got a group of people or someone who, and us included, who have a niche or have a talent or a gifting and it's successful and has fruit, he just gets behind it and will use that in the body and encourage them to go out and to do and to be outside the walls. That's a kingdom mindset. That's not a Babel mindset. So many churches and people today, though, we have this Babel mindset that focuses on us, build ourselves a name, build up some constructs for ourselves to make ourselves awesome instead of making God awesome. So I invite you to do an internal audit. Where are you? Where is your church? Where is your ministry? It's something we are very concerned about here. Even at the Crucibles Fire, we intentionally take some steps to just let the Lord lead, let the Lord do and build. If he builds it to a viral sensation, great. But if he's just got 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 or 100 faithful people that we're being able to minister to, so be it. We did reach a milestone this week. We are now just over 800 users on our app. Just a few months ago, we were at 200. And so he is blessing, and that's great. But it's okay if it's not. It's not about that. And that's really the message, is it's not about making a name for ourselves. It's about making much of the name of Christ and spreading that. So I hope you got something out of the readings this week. Next week, week 12, we're going to deal with the disinheriting of the nations, which is some more judgment that comes from not humanity's rebellion, but once again, a spiritual rebellion. There have been several major rebellions in the scriptures, and here comes another one. And we're going to see how that impacts even what's happening in the world today. Again, I asked you to pray about supporting the ministry. You can go to thecruciblesfire.org/donate, or you can go to the app into the giving tab there at the bottom right and do it that way. Don't forget about its March Madness for the Bible giveaway all through the month of March. And I would also ask you to go out into the app, look on the Academy, or go to academy.thecruciblesfire.org. And you can see all of our Academy offerings there as well. It's all online and it's all free to help you to learn, teach, repeat. Love you guys. Appreciate you joining us today, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.